Hello and welcome to the Quarantined Wargamer. I'm Big Lee and today I want to talk about conquering that lead mountain. Does your lead mountain give you stress? Is its gravitational field starting to interfere with your enjoyment of the hobby? Do you feel you need supplemental oxygen to reach the top of that peak? If the answer is yes to any of those, then you probably need to consider reducing your lead mountain. And this video is basically something that I've touched on before in other videos, but basically this is a condensed version of my strategy for conquering your lead mountain. So most tabletop wargamers have a lead mountain somewhere or other. Most of us have done it. We've been in the game long enough to have collected quite a lot of unpainted metal, plastic or indeed resin these days. So it doesn't matter what period or genre you're into, we're all guilty of it. There's just too much shiny out there to resist sometimes, particularly when you're wandering around the game shows. And you know, inevitably, the longer that you've been doing this mad hobby of ours, the larger your lead mountain. Indeed, its exponential growth puts even COVID to shame. And of course, having a lead mountain can cause all sorts of problems, you know, storage problems, money issues, it can even cause marital problems in some circumstances. So I would say that it's worthwhile having a look at that lead mountain and seeing if there's something you can do about it. Now the first step is to get yourself organised. Now I've touched on this subject in an earlier video. I'll put a link in here or over here, Robert, probably, to the earlier video, because I'm a great proponent of being well organised and understanding where everything is, and that includes your collection in your lead mountain. Now understanding exactly what is in that collection not only reduces the chances that you're going to accidentally duplicate and buy something again, but it also helps you to identify exactly where everything is and reminds you of exactly what you've bought. Because let's face it, we've all gone around shows, bought stuff and got home and gone, I don't remember buying that. I've done it myself on many occasions. And the other advantage of getting organised and understanding what you've got in your lead mountain is it helps you to formulate a realistic understanding of the size of the task before you. You know, it's a wake-up call that enables you to clearly say, I need to reduce this mountain by some degree. You know, this project needs to go, or I'm never going to get round to painting that. The next step is that you must be honest with yourself. You know, it requires a bit of discipline. It has to be said. You know, you've got to ask yourself, what can you realistically hope to get painted? Yeah, you know, and that's largely going to depend on the speed at which you paint, your motivation, the resources, and even the cash available to you. You know, what periods of your collections are you actually going to play? You need to be honest about that with yourself. You know, you may have collected that really interesting Aztec army, but if you've got no one to play it with, are you really going to ever get round to doing it? I would always recommend that you, once you've organised and worked out what's in your collection, that you put it into a priority list. The ones that you absolutely really must get painted, right down to the bottom of the list. And then what I'd say is, the top item on the list, get it painted. The bottom item on the list needs to be considered to be sold or given away or got rid of in some way, because if it's down at the bottom of a list of a dozen items, you're never going to get there. So if it's at the bottom of your list, you've already mentally accepted that it's not as important as the other 11 items ahead of it in the list. So, you know, consider it for disposal. So when I suggest disposing of stuff, of course I do mean mostly selling it, but also you could donate it to a club or give it to a friend. But obviously it'd be better if you can try and recoup some of the cost to put towards your other hobby activities, perhaps rebuilding that army that's at the top of your list. But certainly sites like eBay and Etsy are really good for disposing of collections. And of course, if shows resume at some point in the future, maybe bring and buys will continue. Oh, 3 deep queues, cool. Another time, another place, eh? Anyway. So, like I say, you could sell on eBay or Etsy, sell it to a club, donate it to a club, give it to a friend. The point is you're taking the item that's at the bottom of your list, the one that you're never going to get round to if you're really honest with yourself, and sending it to a better home so that it will finally get a life on the games table. You know, aim to recoup the cost that you've spent if you can, and reduce that mounting. But ultimately, the aim is not about making money; it's about reducing your lead mounting. So, okay, if you only break even or you make a slight loss, so be it. You've got rid of it. You've reduced your mounting. They've hopefully gone to a better life, and you may have a little bit of extra money to put in towards your current hobby. You know, so I would always say, don't aim to make a profit. At the end of the day, it's all about trying to reduce that lead mounting. The next step is a fairly obvious one: make a painting plan, and more to the point, paint. Set yourself a realistic painting target. You know, I'm going to paint X number of figures a week, or I'm going to complete this unit by such and such a date, or, you know, plan out as far in advance as you need to. Don't beat yourself up if you don't hit those targets, but at least having a plan will help motivate you to get on with it. You know, be realistic, but also try to be a little bit ambitious. Stretch yourself if you can. Break jobs down into manageable chunks so that you don't get overwhelmed. And try and put together collective targets with other people. So, for instance, if you've got a group of friends or a club, try and organise that you all paint together, so that you've sort of a little bit of an element of competition between each other, so that you can motivate yourself to get stuff painted. Now, I take part in something called the Analog Hobbies Painting Challenge, run by a fantastic gentleman called Kurt out in Canada, and he has an international collection of painters. We all join in and we say we're going to paint so many figures, and there's a points values for different scales, and you know, we might say I'm going to paint 600 points worth of figures, or 1,000 points worth of figures, or whatever. Ultimately, people like me, you know, there's usually about 80 to 100 people taking part. Only one person's going to be at the top of the list, and they're going to be stratospheric in the number of points they've painted. But for the rest of us, it's more about taking part and getting some painting done. And I've found that the Analog Painting Challenge, for me, is an excellent way to motivate me to get out there and paint stuff. I've painted some lots and lots of figures during the painting challenge that I probably wouldn't have been motivated to do otherwise. So, you know, collective targets with your group of friends, your club, or an online challenge like the Analog Hobbies Painting Challenge. Great way to motivate you and to get you to clear some of that lead mounting, to make a dent in it. And at all times, keep saying to yourself, any progress is good progress. You know, so long as you're reducing your lead mounting faster than you're adding to it, then that's a good thing. Now, the next tip is a good one, but you might find it difficult. Hands off the credit card. Stop buying new stuff and adding to the pile. Don't buy any more until you've at least reduced part of the mounting. You know, you've got to be disciplined, because that's how that lead mounting got there in the first place, remember? You know, it's easier to a certain extent, I have to admit, that when you're not visiting trade shows at the moment, you haven't got that all shiny, you know, that impulse buying. And again, I've got another video about my impulse buying disasters, and more than one occasion I've spent money in the heat of the moment and regretted it later. And probably a significant portion of your lead mounting is the same. So keep your hands off the credit card, stop going online and buying stuff. Obviously you need supplies, you know, so things like paint and brushes and so on, they're all allowed. You can get as much of that as you want, so treat yourself to some of that. In fact, this is a good way, if you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, and admittedly not many of us do these days, but if you're one of those lucky few, instead of spending that money on yet more figures that you're probably never going to get round to painting, treat yourself to a quality piece of equipment, some really good brushes, or an upgrade on your airbrush, or whatever it might be. You know, get your retail therapy fix that way, without adding to your mounting until you've at least reduced it slightly. Of course, presents and things like that don't count. We're coming up towards Christmas, but don't cheat by asking them to buy all your models for you, because at the end of the day, you need to reduce that lead mounting. It doesn't matter whether you've bought it or somebody else has bought it. If it's in that lead mounting, you're still going to need oxygen to reach the peak until you've started to clear some of it. So a few basic tips there for how to clear that lead mounting, to reduce it down. Now, I'll say there's loads of benefits from doing this. You know, from much as anything else, it's good for your mental health. You know, it's good to clear the decks occasionally to reduce that workload, that nagging doubt on your shoulder that's saying to you, telling you off for all the things that you haven't got round to painting. Clear some of it, make life a little bit easier for yourself. Maybe raise some new money for your hobby. Even if you don't recoup the full cost that you spent out originally, at least that money can be rediverted into what you're working on now. You clearing some of your leg mounting frees you to finish other projects. You might finally see some progress in your painting. It can be a very social effort if you join in with other people. And of course, at the end of the day, it can help you to save money, because if you get a bit more disciplined about it, you're not going to be spending money on stuff that you're never going to get around to painting. We've all done it, we've all bought figures because we really like them, but at the end of the day, part of the reason we're not collecting miniatures, well, most of us aren't collecting miniatures just for the sake of the miniatures. We want to paint them and get them on the games table. And if you can't do that, then you need to ask yourself some deep and searching questions. Look in that mirror and look right into yourself and say, do I really need that bizarre little army that no one else plays and I'm never going to get to play with anyone? Maybe it's time to get rid of it. Or maybe it's time to put it at the top of the list and get on and paint it. So as usual, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please hit the like button and obviously consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love to hear from you, how large is your lead mounting? I made a conscious effort to clear mine a few years ago, and although I still think I've got quite a lot in various storage boxes in here, I know exactly what I've got, and I know that a large chunk of it is actually going to get painted over the winter when I take part in the painting challenge. So what about you? How large is your lead mounting? Do you have stuff stuck in every cupboard in the house, hidden from your significant other in case they find out how much you actually own? Maybe it's time you made a list as well. Anyway, until next week, as usual, I'd obviously say, I hope you're staying well, getting in as many games as you can, and of course, keep rolling high.